Okay, this meeting is being recorded. You've heard that from the voice of authority, the Zoom goddess. So, Nathan, did you have a question about ethics for Daniel or me?
Well, maybe for both of you, Daniel made me think of it, and I'm sure Thad, you have a take. So one of the things that was kind of formative for me as an almost philosophy major was this idea of the concept of virtues, and in particular virtue ethics. And I hear sometimes in your the thoughts that you expressed, Thad, but particularly in some of the things that Daniel expresses, like there are some judgments of that seem to be oriented towards what is good. And when he talked about enjoyment versus pleasure, there's a sense that there's some kind of distinction of virtue between the two. And like it was that kind of study was interesting to me and still is conceptually. So I wonder like what Daniel thinks about the concept of virtue in life and how it does or doesn't align to the issues that he laid out. And then that I suspect I know where you'll come from on this, but maybe you'll surprise me. And I'd love to hear your take on it as well.
I don't even know what I think yet. Let me
I know, I got to think about it a little too. I mean, I think what I was trying to suggest, really, I was really informed by Nietzsche in ways I didn't even realize until I started really writing it all down and thinking it through. But that he does privilege something, right? And I think that's what you're sort of hearing, right? It's not whatever happens. There is a privileging of something, right? There are criteria. But those criteria are strange because they're not external and they're in flux, right? So that's what I'm saying, you get a principle that's not a principle, which is, the principle, let's say, vitality or health. And what does that mean? And what does that look like? And that is how I think he's defining virtue, I think, right? Which is really not a virtue, but it's also not, one thing I was going to touch on, it sort of veered away from it, but like, I think there's a general conception that, and I think this comes from Rousseau and Hobbes and from the sort of liberal tradition that we come out of, which is there's a state of nature. I mean, Freud emphasizes this too, that without culture, without law, we're just going to fuck and suck and kill and shoot and be animals. But that's a certain model, right? That's a certain figure. It's a certain argument. And I don't ascribe to that argument. Nietzsche does not ascribe to that argument, right? And Foucault does not ascribe to that argument, right? There are always all kinds of, there's no primal thing we want to do. Like the id is a false construct. And Deleuze and Guattari wrote their book, Anti-Oedipus, right? They devoted fucking thousands of pages to argue against the notion of the unconscious. And this idea that we have some primal instinct to go and kill, that when we're thrown back on ourselves, it's not a call to, the common conception of greed and consumption at all, right? That, it might end up taking that form, but I don't think that's the default form, which is what people who are fans of external ethics or external law assume. We need the law to stop you from doing these things which you'll naturally do. You'll naturally be greedy. But I just don't think that's true. I think the self is much more complicated than that. And, it's an argument that's wielded against Buddhism quite often, right? That if everything is perfect as it is, that it's amoral, that it's amoral, that there's a kind of indifference. But the Zen position, or I don't know if the Zen position, the Taoist position is, I actually don't know anything about Zen. The Taoist position is that when you let go of judgment and these external criteria, you actually open up to a place of the deep ecology of life. And you actually come to a place of sort of a natural love, right? That their model is that the natural state, and I'm saying they're correct. I'm saying it's a counter argument to Rousseau's argument, the Hobbesian argument of a nasty, brutish, and short life that needs to be hedged by law and ethics. They're suggesting, no, that in fact, those things, law and ethics, are things that get in the way and make us judgmental. That in fact, if we just accept radical acceptance of the way things are, we actually stop becoming little fucking assholes. We stop becoming bigots. We stop carpet bombing countries. Our cruelty just dissipates on its own, because what we discover is we're fundamentally ecological, right? We are contingent beings. Again, I'm not saying that's what I believe per se. I'm saying there's different ways of thinking about what counts, why one would be ethical. In in the last chapter of Deleuze has two books on Spinoza. The second one called Expressionism, I've never read on purpose because Deleuze is very influential when you read him. He's very hard to read that philosopher again afterwards. But he wrote a short book on Spinoza early in his career called Practical Philosophy. Anybody interested in Deleuze, it's the book I'd probably recommend. It's pretty accessible. The last chapter on it, he distinguishes between ethics and morality. And morality is always that external term. It's thou shalt. It's something coming outside. It's fixed in place. It's universal. Where ethics is is always being worked out on the fly from emergent circumstances, right? We're always necessarily have some kind of ethical relationship to other beings. It simply is the relational mode to other beings, and it's sort of free of good and bad per se, right? So I think virtue, in some sense, drops away as a term, or you flip it and say the virtue is vitality and health, and I think, Nietzsche was so great at this he claims that the world shows itself, right? You're not beautiful on the outside and ugly inside, or ugly on the outside and beautiful on the inside. For him, everything shows itself. He says you can smell the rotting, it's a hilarious line. He's in the middle of making this whole argument, this sustained argument about the problem with Christianity and the genealogy of morals. And all of a sudden he stops. He goes, stop, I have to say something. Foul air. There's nothing more grotesque than the stench of the rotting entrails of some ill-constituted soul. And then he goes back to his argument. But we know this. I had a good friend who studied very intensely, almost like a disciple, with this Zhigang master in the United States. And my friend was blown away by this guy, because this guy my friend didn't believe this guy was real. And my friend was a martial arts guy, and he went to see this guy, and the guy knocked him down without touching him, just threw my friend to the ground. And he was like, fuck, this shit is real. And my friend came out here and worked with me, and we learned to play with energy a lot. It was this incredible experience. And over time, my friend began to realize that this teacher was just an unbelievable egotistical creep. He was just a motherfucker. And he had a super hard time reconciling these two things. This guy had this incredible power, and he was still this egomaniacal motherfucker, and I met the guy, and he was a creep, And so health is a funny thing, because here's this guy who's just a Zhigang master, truly just, meditating 4 hours a day, able to manipulate energy in this incredible way, and at the same time, this astounding asshole. And he's just not healthy. You knew when you were around him, there was just the stench of him. Like his ego was still this disease that was eating at him. So health is a funny thing, right? Because when I say health, you can be really fit and still just be a fucking asshole and sick, deeply sick inside. And I think we all know this, right? I know plenty of people who are very well-versed yoga instructors and enthusiasts, but they're ill-constituted. They're not, right? So it's this thing when you begin to really feel vital and healthy, that doesn't mean acting totally selfishly and fucking with the world, right? I think you develop a softer relationship to the world. I don't know if that answers your question, maybe indirectly or.
Yeah, I think it does. It just, the concept of health sounds to me like it works in a way similar to the concept of wisdom or courage, right? Like it's an ideal for which you strive,
okay,
right? You base your judgments and your decisions upon it, and you look for exemplars of that virtue as a guide to being virtuous, like in this case, healthy, right? And there are other ways, other concepts that you can apply. But the reason I wanted to ask is because that concept isn't. I don't think it's objective. It's an intensely personal thing, just like a virtue is or can be. Although I think most people, when you talk about it, would find things in common, right? Yep. When they talk about the topic.
Okay. One thing that I think is kind of interesting about it as a kind of principle or this criteria is that like you said, it's very personal. It's not external. It's also always changing. So when you say it's an ideal, it is an ideal, but you only know it in the experience of it. It's never outside. It's never something I'm out there I'm going to get, which is unfortunately the way a lot of health is set up. I'm going to get on a diet to reach this end. I'm going to work out so that I'm like this. It's super teleological as opposed to teleonomical. That's another distinction that I learned in my life pretty early on that really helped shape my life. So teleological is moving towards an end state, towards a purpose, either good or bad, right? So any notion of progress is teleological, right? We're getting better or we're getting worse, right? It's moving with a direction. Teleonomical is moving with purpose, but that purpose is imminent to that position as opposed to an end state. So evolution, Darwinian evolution is often framed as teleological, right? There was a reason we developed the thumb in order to eat, but that's not Freud at all. Freud offers teleonomy. It's just a fucking accident that becomes the purpose, right? The purpose is the accident. You can't separate those two. Another way to think about is teleological is I'm going to go to Thad's house and I know the clear direction, right? I'm going to take this route. I'm going to get to his house. That is a clear purpose, as opposed to Thad and I, let's go on a walk and just meandering. We have a purpose, but it's always at the moment. We're not going anywhere, but we're going, right? Kerouac, on the road, right there. It's a classic teleonomy. They're driven constantly by purpose, but there's no end state. They're not going for anything.
Right. I'm also thinking of the Situationists, and what was the thing about like walking through? What did they call it?
Derivé.
Yeah, but wait, the walking through the city, sort of like randomly, semi-randomly.
Yeah, the Derive. Yeah.
Derive. Yeah.
I mean, that's a huge figure for me, and it's I call the affect walk, or they call the color walk. I call it the affect walk, right? Like when I leave the house, rather than going somewhere or saying I'm going to go for my exercise, I follow wherever I'm drawn by the affect of that place. And I reckon the affect as I'm moving, the mood on each street, as I pass each house, as I look which way I'm going to go next. I look up the street and I'm like, I'm just drawn. How, why, or how? I don't know, but I just am. It's not arbitrary. It's absolutely determined, but it's not predetermined. Nietzsche did one of the best moves Nietzsche makes is he conflates chance and fate, right? They're not opposed terms to him. They're in fact absolutely the same thing. Your fate is what you do. It's absolutely determined, but it's not predetermined.
So Nathan, I'll answer your question totally differently. I think so. You asked about virtue, like what do we consider, or what was the question about virtue for me? Like what's the question you have for me about virtue?
I think the question for you is more about as you identify behaviors that are characterized as vices, right? Or that most people consider to be vices and bad and selfish and of the body. Your method of approaching them is to say, no, actually these things are virtuous, right? Because there's some different force at work, or there's some different ideal involved that actually makes the behavior virtuous. So I wonder about how big a role it plays in the way you think about things, because on some level what you're doing, and a lot of the arguments that you make, is you're saying, well, you can think about it this way, or you can think about it that way, and when you think about it in the second way, in the latter way, you can actually characterize it as being virtuous. So there are some things that I think you believe to be virtues, whether that's individual, freedom, or like agency, ownership of your own body, other things like that. But they are ideals that you seem to have latched onto as being good, right? Or and good, it may be conflating concepts too much, but at least they're virtuous and they're ideals that are positive. So I wonder about how you think about that concept when you frame your arguments, or do you?
Okay. So I don't like virtue as a concept. I don't use it. I don't like it because it is historically, almost always, I think, a moralistic concept. It's about what one should do to be good. That's kind of the classical definition of it, right? From virtu in ancient Greek, right? Didn't Plato deploy that shit first, So I don't do that. Like, I don't say drinking historically has been to excess has been considered to be a bad thing. I think it's actually virtuous. It's actually a good thing. I just say that for certain purposes, it has been a good thing, right? It gave us the weekend, is the argument I make. Drunks in the factories who refused to work on Saturday and Sunday forced employers to give them the weekend off, and that's why we have the weekend. That kind of argument. But that's only if you like the weekend. You don't have to like the weekend. I don't think you're bad if you don't like the weekend. If you think that we should work 7 days a week, 60, I don't. 16 hours a day, that's your choice. Go for it. Just don't make me do that. So I don't like virtue. What I do like is, and I really like, is for people to be clear about what they value. What you value, what Jed values, what Matt values, what each of us individually values. And I want people to, and I don't care. I mean, I sort of care, but I leave it up to you. And once you just tell me what you value in the moment, and as Daniel keeps reminding me, it's all temporal and contingent. Those values can change. That's all good. I want to leave those as sovereign choices, to leave you the fuck alone with your choice of values. If you choose to work 80 hours a week, great. If you choose to live according to Sharia law, awesome. Seriously. As long as you don't force it on me, I will even fight for your ability to do that. I will protect you from the imperialists who want to change your way of life. What I find very often, and I used to ask this question to my students in my normie colleges where I used to teach, I would just say to them on the first day, "What do you guys want?" And they'd be like, "What? Was that a question? What, huh?" I said, "No, what do you guys want?" And they're like, "What do you mean, like chips and a drink?" "No, like, what do you want in your life? Fucking ninnies." Like, you don't have an answer to the most important question of all at all. They don't even have the beginning of an answer. They've never even contemplated the question. They never even thought the question was at hand. They never even thought it was a question. What do you want with your life, you fucking idiot? How do you not even be, what? You have no clue? You're just going to be like pushed around and told what to do the rest of your life? My God. Blank when I ask that question.
Well, you're there to tell them that, right? I mean, that's your role as the instructor, right? To instruct them in the things that they should want,
Yeah.
so they can learn.
So I said to them, what you should want is service to nation and God. No, kidding. I said, that's a choice. I probably will end up fighting you on the barricades at some point, but okay. So that, so that means what I'm really calling for there is for people, this is totally Nietzschean. What I'm calling for in doing that is for people to free themselves from morality. Because the only way most people have a way of answering that is what they should do. Well, what I want to do, even if I really kept pressing those kids, you know what they would have said, right? If I really kept hammering, well, what do you want? What do you want to do? What do you want in your life? They said, oh, I want to serve people. I want to be of service. I want to help other people. I want to uplift the poor in Mozambique. I want to, whatever. So free yourself from morality. Think about what you want as an individual. And I will leave you alone. I promise you. I won't judge it. I won't criticize it. I won't moralize it. In fact, I will protect it. It is sovereign. And according to my politics, it should be sovereign. It should be treated as sovereign. Now, what do I value? This is sort of a different question, but I think you might have been answering this. And this is where maybe I'll be surprising you a bit, because I think my mind has changed a bit really recently on this. So I used to always say, what I value is freedom and pleasure. That was like my shtick for more than a decade. Freedom and pleasure, freedom and pleasure, freedom. And I still do. Love me some freedom and pleasure. Nope, I love them. But you know what I think right now? I also love and I want and I value just as much, maybe equally, is, get ready, here comes a C word, community. Not collectivity, not collectivism, certainly not communism. I'm not even sure about communitarianism. I don't really like the way that's been deployed either. I don't like the sound of that one either. But I sure as fuck value this right here. What we're doing right here and what we've been doing for 3 years now. But the freedom of this community that we've created together here, the freedom in it has to be there. So I think that's what, to me, what RU is, what I want it to be is, and I've said this in RU weekends. You guys have probably heard me say this in person before. Like, I want a free community, basically. So we have open borders, right? You can come and go whenever you want. You can say whatever you want, so long as it's not, an act of aggression, I guess, against another person, although that hasn't really been a problem yet. But, I wouldn't, if someone got on here and started screaming at me about how ugly I was, I probably would cancel them. But, as long as you come in here and you're, that's it though. I mean, you can criticize the fuck out of me. You can even be a little bit mean to me. You can even call me names, maybe. Depends on the names, Really, like, I am for coarse discourse. That's one of the things I was trying to tell you guys about when I was giving my spiel about Trump earlier. I am in favor of coarse discourse, especially in politics. And that's what I think Trump has really brought to American politics, which is a great thing. But anyway, so a community in which freedom is paramount and practiced. It is the central ethic. And one in which, and we don't do enough of this, but we're doing more and more of it, in which one of the objectives is to gain more pleasure in our lives. Now, we're a bunch of egghead intellectuals here, right? So a lot of the pleasure that we get is from reading and talking about big ideas and shit like this that most people consider to be just bizarre, alien way of thinking. But also, like I said, we're teaching courses on how to fuck. Like, when Carol's done with the sex positivity course, which is mostly an intellectual course on the history of sex positive feminism, etc., she's going to teach courses on how to fuck, like how to give a blowjob, like how to perform cunnilingus. Like, seriously, that's what she used to do in San Francisco for more than a decade. She gave classes on those things, and they were extremely popular. So, right, and then of course we're teaching courses on cannabis, and on and on. I mean, we can go craft brewing. I'm open to that kind of thing too, whatever it is. So those are my values. But community, to me now in my life, right here and right now, in this time and space, community is vital for me. Like, the freedom and pleasure is harder to gain without a group of friends to do it with.
Back to Nathan's question, I think what Nathan's poking at is there's still some criteria here, right?
Yeah.
But what's complicated about, I think, with that, and I agree, is these kinds of principles or criteria that are not set in stone, they're not fixed, they're not universal, they're not exterior.
Yeah.
When I was teaching rhetoric, my introduction to rhetoric, I taught for many years at Cal, it always drove students crazy, but I said, rhetoric is the position of all positions, including the position that says the position of all positions is full of shit, right? It's what it was really doing was fucking with set theory, right? That Bertrand Russell couldn't really deal with the set of all sets, right? Because what could include the set of all sets? You can't have a set of all sets. So he just made the rule of set theory, there can't be a set of all sets. There just can't be. He just made that a rule so the system could work, right? But rhetoric is the set of all sets, including the set that refuses the set of all sets, if that makes sense. And I think what both Matt and I are proffering in slightly different language and coming from different directions, but saying that there are these figures like sovereignty, which I'm going to privilege, but it's always defined individually. I'm not going to tell you what your sovereignty is. You want to wear a fucking thing over your face? Go for it. You want to get fucked in the ass all day, every day? Power to you. Whatever you want to do. And even I'll defend your right to do it if it comes down to that. Even if I disagree with you, even if whatever it is, if you want to be doing that.
Right. So here I am, Mr. Postmodernist, talking about these categories of freedom, pleasure, community, right? Oh my God. And rules. If you come into my community and say bad things about me, I might have to cancel you. That doesn't sound very postmodern at all, does it now? Well, okay, so it's because I haven't finished talking. The reason it's consistent with my thinking is that I say the following. All of those are social constructs. Freedom, first of all, has been constructed in infinite ways, right? I have my own particular conception of freedom. We can talk about what it is, but it's very particular. It's mine, and it is a social construct like a motherfucker. There's nothing natural, innate, or anything about it, or God-given, that's for sure. It comes from this little head and the influences around me, right? Pleasure. I mean, obviously, that can be defined in all kinds of ways. I have my own particular social construct of pleasure that I value, that I simply, here it is, I don't think is universal. I don't even think is good for you or any necessarily, or another person. It's just what I choose. It's just the social construct that I choose to value over other things. That's it. I'm just choosing to pursue that. That's it. There's nothing true about it, right about it, good about it. It's just what I choose. And right now I'm also choosing community too, of a very particular kind, right? Because there's all kinds of communities and most of them don't look anything like this or the kind of community I want. So it's totally a social construct. I'm just choosing that one social construct over others. And I think that should be okay with everyone, right? So that's
it also shifts the whole notion of virtue. I mean, what again, dive back to your question, Nathan. Here's Dad saying, well, I believe in this certain thing. But like I was saying with rhetoric, it's the position of all positions. So including the position that doesn't want that. So Dad will even go to war for the people who are dictatorial because that's what they're doing. As long as they're not doing it to me, I'm down with it. Yeah. You know, like you think of whatever, hardcore fundamentalist Islam, like, okay, power to you. I'm not going to go in there and say, this is what I hear you saying that, right? I'm not going to go in there and tell you like a good liberal that this isn't right. You got to liberate your women and the women don't, that's a false consciousness. They don't actually want to be doing that. Right. I know better. I'm a white woman in fucking Westchester, New York. And I know that those women over there want what I have, which is a pantry full of goods and whatever the fuck, right? Like that's the essence. Liberalism is premised on everyone else they don't know what they want. I know what they want, right? That's why liberalism and imperialism are born together. They're born of the same thing. Yeah, they are the same thing. That was a revelation in college that set me free. Right?
You had that revelation before you knew me?
Yeah, that was a college thing. I was like, oh, liberalism. Damn. Oh, I think I know what's better for you, so I'm going to invade you and set up my missions. And
wow, I thought I was the only one who made that argument. I mean, you won't see that argument. Matt Hodgins can back me up here. You will not see that argument about, you definitely won't see that argument about liberalism among historians or really anybody in the academy these days except me.
They're the same thing. And it's the will to know what's better for somebody else.
I know.
What I actually like about I wanted to write a book a million years ago with a friend of mine on the aesthetics of imperialism. Because I'm not an historian, as I've said, I don't really know things, but when the little flickers that come through popular culture, I think about, when like the British would send people out or Marco Polo, they were looking for spices. Like the British are sitting up there like, God, our food is so bland, man. Go get spices, not go conquer someone else and teach them the way to live. Just go get some better food. Get some women who look different. I'm sick of looking at these people. Like get something else. And I think there's a beautiful argument for the aesthetics of imperialism that would really trouble liberals. And when I started poking into it in grad school, you can only imagine the reaction in the rhetoric department to this line of thinking. The pleasures, the indulgence of a certain kind of imperialism, because the way imperialism came out was this absolute liberal agenda of, I know what's right for you. You don't know. I know. The Marxists take it up too, right? The Marxists who hate the liberals do the same thing. You don't know. You don't want that job.
Right.
You don't want to be working that way. Yeah.
Now let's go to let's take it to the next level. Okay. I believe to be truly anti-imperialist, one must defend certain kinds of imperialism. Why? Because there are many people in Iraq today who think it was a great thing that the United States invaded. They're grateful. Same with Afghanistan. Maybe not a majority, but a lot of people in both countries. A lot of people across Africa are happy as shit the British came in there and built roads for them and hospitals and schools.
Yeah.
A fuck ton of people in the Philippines are thrilled that the United States controlled that country for better part of a century, right? And they want they remember why I talked about wanting daddy in the first talk, right? People wanting daddy, how I wanted daddy. Nathan, I wanted you to be my daddy. I still kind of do. No, I still very much do want you to be I want someone like Nathan, a big barrel-chested bearded guy, to be my daddy. Well, that's a real thing that I honor and respect. That's some people's values. It's sometimes, in some moments, it's my value. So if you want to be invaded and taken charge of, taken control, you know, if you want, and this can, right, many form, but yes, sexuality too. This is correct, right? Talk to the kink community about this. Because a whole bunch of what goes on in kink looks like imperialism. Looks like the worst kind of imperialism. Conquest. Much of porn is conquest. Much of sex is conquest and control. Right? And making people do what you want them to do to please you. I'm not going to get in the way of that. In fact, I'm going to protect people's ability. I don't like to use the word right, because that's a weird construct too, but I'm going to protect their ability to do that. I just don't want to be invaded by most people. Maybe some people. You know, right? Colonized, maybe, you know, better term. I don't, in general, and then I don't want to be colonized, but what I do not want to do, or at least I want to be conscious of, is any moment in which I start to speak on behalf of the other people. Gayatri Spivak, Derrida's translator, wrote a famous essay called "Who Speaks for the Subaltern," in which she was criticizing Western academics who were writing. It was the beginning of South Asian studies. It was basically the study of peasants in South Asia. And it was all these fucking academics in Harvard and Yale and Columbia and Berkeley writing these essays, journal articles, and books about what the peasants of India wanted and needed. And Gayatri Spivak, unfortunately, in a bunch of Pomo language, basically said, what the fuck? Who the fuck do you think you are, white girl?
That was Foucault's move, right, with the prisons.
Yeah.
Like Foucault's main political activism was not speaking for prisoners, but letting prisoners speak for themselves.
A lot of people in prison want to be there. A lot of people in prison a lot of people get out of prison and want to go back. We know this. This is true. A lot of people like it. Like why? Because they have shelter and food provided for them.
Yeah. And that's why your position, back to Nathan's first question, is virtue might not be the right way to talk about it, but it is a criteria. They are criteria there that are ever changing and always particular. So there's something privileged, but never universal, never, right? So and filled with nuance and changing. So sometimes you want to be colonized. Yeah, fucking bitch. Sorry, girl, colonize me. You know, like I don't know how that came out. My kid listens to a lot of the hip hop music, so I apologize.
Yeah, that's right. Blame the rappers for what you say. That's good.
Well, my kid and I, who I just spent the last week with, just me and him here. You know, we make a lot of jokes to each other about the hip hop language. So the things we throw around in our house, we know not to bring outside the house, and I just broke that. The community thing is super interesting. I wouldn't mind talking about that. And I realized that, Thad, that I've never told you this. I don't know why this has never come up, but about 25 years ago, I started putting together, I thought it was going to be this nonprofit. I started looking into it and getting stats. It was called, and I own the URL somewhere, it's called the Society of Individuals. And the idea was to exactly this, and to sponsor artists and thinkers and filmmakers, whoever it was, who advocated who were different, who didn't fit into the structure, who were never going to get funded anywhere else, and had a certain belief. And the idea of, I still come back over and over again to this idea of the Society of Individuals, which I think is what you're talking about. You're talking about community.
Yeah.
And it's not everybody atomized, right? Atomization of America is the dream of the control state, the corporate government state, right? Where you're absolutely isolated. And this is what's happened, right? I mean, we all know this. It's the dream of marketers, because they can market directly to you. We know exactly what you're thinking. We only serve you ads for you. You have your own phone. You have your own computer, right? I mean, growing up, we had communal phones, right? It was a phone for the household. You weren't yet atomized. And it happens to be this absolute coincidence, not surprising in the neoliberal state, of the dream of corporations to sell you shit and of the state to isolate you and keep you from organizing, right? They are one-to-one aligned in the atomization of people, right? And the atomization sounds like individualism, but in fact, of course, it's not, right? It's isolate you so that I can control you and only feed you your world. Where I think what we're talking about with this idea of community or society of individuals is this other thing, right? Where everyone comes on their own terms and has this fundamentally different relationship to the other, which is kind of complicated, hard to talk about. And I think I would love to hear you talk more about it too, Thad. Like one thing I come back to a bunch is neighborhood. So when I first came to San Francisco, I lived in the Mission District. And right now the mission has changed and it's no longer what it was when I got here. But it really was, a lot of us came here all the same time. Slacker had just come out. I came here Slacker came out while I was living here. It's for all you Gen Xers. I was right in the core of that world. And the the music store that opened, the bar that opened. And we had this kind of world where everyone was doing their own thing. And yet I knew if I passed out in the bar, they're not just going to leave me there, right?
Right.
And in fact, that bar keeps Narcan behind the counter, and it's a community, but do whatever the fuck you want, and a privilege that it really. And I think neighborhoods can really do that really well, and when they turn dark is the signs I see around town for the last 20 years. If you see suspicious activity, report it. It's the worst aspect of neighborhoods. The best part of neighborhoods is simply by proximity, you just respect that person's shtick. As long as you're not interfering, as long as you're not cranking up music or dumping your garbage in my lawn or having your dog shit in my yard. I love my weird old neighbor, right? And I'll buy him or her groceries if they need them, if they're sick, right? Without having to actually share a common position. We don't have to like each other. We don't have to agree to anything other than co-living as individuals, but yet we're not isolated. We're not atomized. There still is a kind of communality simply because we're sharing this space. And I've always found that neighborhoods at their best offer this best kind of community. At their worst, in my last neighborhood, there was like a community organization because there'd been a bunch of break-ins. And I wouldn't participate at all. I refused to join them at all because I'm like, fuck, I'm the guy that's gonna run out of town. Like it was all this paranoia, this like white liberal fucking common think nonsense. And I was the one who's gonna get run out, as opposed to just simply emergent neighborhoods, right? Where people, I've seen it in my life. You see it in New York where people lived in the same place for so long. And they're such different people, and yet they coexist. I think about apartment buildings, where each unit is so different. So weird what's going on inside each person's house. This weird kink guy, this weird old lady, this whatever the hell's happening, and yet they coexist, without being thoroughly atomized. And I think, I'm a little inarticulate on it because I'm still trying to figure out the terms of what you mean when you say community, because I've been interested in the same thing. Because atomization, I think people can take a lot of things you say, things I say, and say, well, that's just radical individualism, just living off the grid, doing your own thing. It can be that, but it doesn't need to be that.
So I'm ambivalent about neighborhoods, geographical communities, right? Is what you're talking about?
Yeah.
I mean, that's small, the smallest scale geographical community. So my experience, well, I talked about college in my first talk today, my college experience. Antioch College had 500 students in it. So it was like the size of a small neighborhood, really small, right? And we were all on this little campus in the middle of Ohio, rural Ohio. So we were just always next to each other. Now, I found out in the course of my career at Antioch that a neighborhood like that, a community like that, a geographical community like that can be a society of friends or a society of cops.
Yeah, totally.
And
Totally. Yeah,
and I very much experienced both
totally.
in that college environment. So like often it meant that we just had awesome parties. There's dancing and making out and flirting and whatever and just fun. And we'd talk about ideas and politics afterward, and and it was just and help each other. But then someone would do something or say something untoward, and the whole community would turn on them, and it became Salem, Massachusetts.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah.
Salem, Massachusetts was a neighborhood.
I
Right?
lost all my friends in college, because they were all these liberals, and I started
Yeah.
spouting various shit. I remember, and
Yeah,
they all stopped talking to me. That's why I refused to ever have a group of friends again.
me too.
And that's why I want to help work with you or hear more what you have to say about this. What are these terms of this community? Because I agree with your neighborhood. I was saying there's two levels. I've had incredible neighborhoods with unbelievable freedom and respect, and yet not isolated.
Yeah. So what I want,
the opposite. I've had dictatorial neighborhoods. Yeah.
Yeah. So fluidity is what I need, geographical and otherwise. So what I want, a neighborhood is also can be roots, which sound good, right? Nourishing roots, or it can be an anchor that just holds you in place.
Yeah.
Right. So what I want, and again, this is my value here, I want multiple neighborhoods. So the big grandiose dream for Renegade University, and I've said this many times in weekends, is I want multiple, what I'm calling outposts for now, but just like physical spaces in various places around the world, starting on the West Coast, where we can come and go and work together, talk together, hang out, do these things together, make courses, do podcasts, make art, do music, have events, whatever. And also live for a time. So we would have like places where people could stay for a time. But the idea is people would be coming and going, and the most importantly, they would have choices of other places to go to. Because I start to feel claustrophobic and trapped and spied upon and surveilled after a while in a particular place. And I just feel self-conscious and, so I want to have many places, and I want to go from place to place to place. Right. But have kind of a root system in each one. And then on top of that, thank God for the internet, no matter where we are, we can do this kind of thing. We can have a community that's virtual, that's floating above the earth, that's a cloud community, right? So I want that too. And then this is like a segue into your other stuff, cryptocurrency.
I was about to say, yeah.
Right? And especially what you're doing with Anatha, which is essentially it's communitarian in a sense, right? Because you're trying to basically replace the welfare state with a private voluntary system based on cryptocurrency. So that's the kind of community I'm into.
Totally. Well, crypto does so well. It's funny. I was just thinking the same thing. And in fact, I'm writing our new pitch deck as we refine our case and ready for launch and try to raise the last round of capital before launch. And one of the use cases is that I'm writing up right now is for eco villages. So we have our own community, but we're actually just creating a platform that will allow any group, community, nation to build their own crypto world, because we believe fundamentally, and I had to have this explained to me, and I've come to believe it, that currency should be competitive. Once currency is competitive, right, it's the last bastion, right? Capitalism, it's capitalism, but then you have one state has a monopoly on money. I mean, it's insane. It's not really capitalist, right? You need currency itself to be competitive. And be like, yeah, I'm not using your fucking currency. Like, imagine opting out of the USD and be like, fuck, I don't like the way you spend this money at all. After this fucking so-called stimulus package, you've got to be kidding me, right? I mean, it's so transparent. But eco villages, so my guy's been talking to one outside Bay Area, somewhere here. He didn't tell me the name or who they are, but they make vegan leather out of mushrooms. But he said a lot of reasons eco villages collapse is they don't really have a way to quantify, a way to pay, a way to really deal with labor and voting. And what crypto really allows is a system of governance. I mean, I don't think people always understand this about about crypto, that it's a network, and that when you hold the token, you're in a sense a member, right? As opposed to the state handing you money. You're not really a member, right? They own it, they have a monopoly on it, and then you get to use it or not. With crypto, you can become part of the chain. And so that you're literally constitutive of the chain, and that each chain, each network has its own rules of governance, right? And it inherently, you have to write that into the algorithm, right? And those rules of governance are, the language they use in crypto, they're immutable. Once they're deployed, they're deployed. And there's no leader who's going to suddenly change it, right? It's deployed. Those are the terms, and they're transparent. They're right there. There's no subterfuge. There's no scam. You either join in or you don't. You either participate or you don't. And the rules of governance can be more or less complex. They can actually be quite centralized, right? Where one person gets to decide how currency is deployed, what the inflation model is, how they vote, what kinds of projects you want to do. They can be radically decentralized in voting system. That voting system can be tethered to how much currency you have or not have. It could be everyone's equal on certain voting measures. It depends, right? But what it allows for is communities that get to control what my guy calls, closed loop economic system, right? Especially for indigenous peoples, or for been in contact or in negotiations with the government of Hawaii for a long time, and their desire to be independent of USD, right? And not have to pay taxes, not be tethered to that system. It creates a closed loop in which Hawaiian economy can prosper without all this extraction from the state of capital. So you can create these local communities that are geographically distributed. And to your point, that you can be in 10 of them, 12 of them, 100 of them. Mm-hmm. There's not just one. Everyone keeps asking about crypto, which one's going to win? That's the wrong thinking. That's the monopoly thinking. Mm-hmm. Our whole platform that we're creating is the idea is no, more currencies. We don't want to be the only one. We'll have our currency. You have your currency. Good. We're happy to lose. We're happy for yours to be better. Because we don't extract anything. There's no centralized board. It's not a corporation. So I don't know if people understand this about crypto too, right? It can be a corporation, but the ideal model is what's called the DAO, the decentralized autonomous organization. Oh, fucking love that shit. There's no central board extracting value, right? The network generates value and is distributed to the community according to the algorithm. Unlike, let's say, Facebook or any centralized corporation, right? We do all this stuff, all this money generates, and they extract it. Profit goes to them, right? The CEO gets, whatever Zucker Jew gets, fucking, I don't know how much goddamn money, every year, and it all goes to him. It's not distributed, right? So crypto begins to, in that, you can have this other kind of network where the value that's generated gets shared to the community, which is the community we're creating, right? We extract zero. We take nothing, right? It's the network, but we participate in the network, so we'll profit with everybody else, right? And that happens to be our community. You can have a different community. So crypto allows for this proliferation of sovereignty. And in fact, that's funny you use that word, because that's the word I'm forcing our company to privilege. It's personal sovereignty and collective prosperity, right?
Do you guys understand how big this shit is we're talking about today? What we are accomplishing here just today, seriously. So I said to my normie students in my normie colleges for 20 years, and this is true. This is everybody who studied political philosophy agrees with me. This is totally standard. Daniel will back me up. The oldest, most enduring, most common question in political philosophy is, what is the proper relationship between the individual and the community, right? What is it? How does that work, right? Everybody's fought over that question since ancient Athens, probably since before that. That's what we've been doing today. We've been actually offering brand new answers, attempting to offer brand new answers to that endless question, which is it's central, right? So the whole idea about crypto, the whole idea about values versus virtue, freeing ourselves from morality, what it means to be in a community but free at the same time, right? How does that, I mean, we're actually offering sort of practical, policies in a way. Like Anatha, this company he works with, is like, they're coming out, they're doing this and it's a real thing. Like, RU is a real thing, and I want it to actually be like, have physical spaces we can go to where we practice what we're talking about here, where we are in a community but we're free at the same time. So yeah, I mean, I just wanted to point that out.
I want to live in the RU dorms. I'm just saying that. I want a single, but I want to live in the dorm.
No, dude. No. What you want to go for is at Antioch you wanted a single double, because there were so few students. Like, yeah. we could get double rooms in a single. Anyway, we'll hook you up. We'll hook you up, and there will be sex workers for sure. We know that.
One of the funny things I learned about when I went to college is I remember freshman year I had to live in the dorms. And there's no way I wanted a roommate. I just don't like having people around me all that much. But I thought it was going to be super hard. I was like, they're never going to give me a single. And of course, they have more singles than people want. Everybody wants a roommate. And it was my first awakening, okay. My first sense of like, like
you're weird.
I think the way someone else thinks can be really different. Like, really at their core, like the idea of sleeping in a room and there's like some other guy right there, I mean, it just grosses me out. I don't let people come in my house really at all, except my son. And problem with women, because I don't want them sleeping there either. We're done, go home, But college was the first time I was like, why doesn't everyone want a single? Like, I was surprised when I got mine. And I was like, oh. And it's meaning, back to what you were saying, that everyone has a different relationship and thinking through what is their individual's relationship to the community.
Because you keep bringing them up, like I have to say this, a great example is the Jews. By the way, I'd say 99.9% of the anti-Semitic slurs, epithets, and jokes I've heard have come from Jews. Just want to point that out.
Which is why the Israelis, that's why the Zionists hate us. They're like, you're self-hating.
That's right. Yeah. But like, not a bad model, generally speaking. Now Jews being the stateless people, right? That's historically their thing. They've had a couple of different responses. One is to create these super tight communities where there's all these rules and restrictions. By the way, have you seen Unorthodox on Netflix yet?
No, I saw you talk about it. Yeah, I saw you tweet about it. Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure you'll like it less than I do because you're smarter than I am. But like,
people love that.
I think it's amazing. But I mean, it shows the Satmar, the Hasidim in New York, the Williamsburg.
Yeah.
And it's just horrific. I mean, from our perspective, like, just the worst possible way to live. I mean, like,
oh yeah, they're super creepy.
It's a police state, like a total totalitarian police state.
Yeah.
And it's about this young woman who like flees, escapes, and totally sheds it and becomes a modern woman in Berlin of all places. But so Jews have, like, their statelessness, they've responded to that by either forming these super tight communities, which suck, or becoming the cosmopolitan Jew, right? The diaspora cosmopolitan Jew, like our friend Daniel Coffeen here, right? Yeah. And now those are our people. Like, they're the model to me. They have done much of the good stuff in modern history.
A distributed community. That's interesting. I'll say culturally, the liberal Jew is, it's obviously this very attractive figure, but in fact is a kind of proto-fascism, because there's this the casual assumption, right? It's the unwillingness. Judaism at its best, we just had Passover. I'm not religious at all. Mm-hmm. Fuck religion to its core. Mm-hmm. But I happen to look like this and talk like this, so I'm Jewish. But Passover is, you're going through answering the questions. Has anyone been to a Seder? We have Jews here, right? So you have, why is this night different? And then what happens is you read back all these different interpretations from the Talmud. According to Rabbi, Moshe Rabinowitz, blah, 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 according to, and that is what Passover is. It's kind of incredible. It's this proffering all these different positions, right? And that's what the Talmud is. That's what you study if you want to become a Rebbe or as a Hasid, right? If you're not studying Torah, of course you read Torah, but you're actually studying Talmud, which is all the interpretations. and they're always multiple. So Jews at their best were great at that, you know, and then the weird thing about them is then they flip it around and become super dictatorial and shave your head and I fuck you through a sheet and all that wacky stuff they get into, you know. The Hasid's are funny to me because I grew up, you know, there was sort of a disdain among liberal Jews about the Hasidim, you know, like they're just nut jobs. And then later I began to kind of really revere them simply for being freaks, for like living right in the city, totally isolated, flipping the birds, everything cool and consumerist. And I was like, okay, I kind of dig that you're just doing your thing. You're living like you're in, you know, early 19th century Poland for some reason. But if that's your ideal, good. The shtetl. I mean, there's a lot of other stuff out here, guys. But no, you want to wear your wool coats and all that.
Yep.
I dig it. It's fucking weird, you know. And now I have that position like you, where it's like they're imperialists, they're dictatorial, but if you're digging it, you know. And if you want to flee, go flee, you know. And I got both your backs in either case, you know.
So it's the eternal statelessness that I'm getting at here with Jews, right? I mean, obviously they founded Israel, but only a tiny portion of Jews live in the fucking place, and most of them have no interest in living there. And they're still considered to be untrustworthy because of their eternal statelessness, right? That's why the Nazis hated them so much. That's why most anti-Semites don't trust them. For good reason. They shouldn't be trusted if you're a nationalist. Let me say that again. If you're a nationalist, you should not trust the Jews. Right? Now that says to me that Jews are the good people in that equation, right?
That's really good.
They're the ones.
Statelessness is, I'm just going to say really fast, is so fucking good.
Yeah,
just
right.
Great. It's fantastic.
Okay, so now the thing about statelessness, so in the United States, so Jews in the United States, something I do know a lot about, right? So stateless people arrive on our shores, the Jews. Italians did it too, but whatever. Stateless arrive here, you know, big numbers, late 19th century, early 20th century. So they did a few different things that people didn't like. One was they got rich off the gullible goyim. Right? They came here not giving a shit about like serving the greater good or the United States of America or doing the right thing according to American values. They were here like, here's an opportunity. And by the way, the goyim are doing it voluntarily. We're not forcing them to pay to buy our trinkets in Lower East Side or whatever it was, or you know, when they took over the banks, you know, whatever. But that was not liked, you know, by a lot of people. The other thing they did when they got here, as you guys all know, is they started hanging out with black people and dancing and playing jazz music and inventing fucking Hollywood and vaudeville and stand-up comedy and burlesque and then porn. That was all Jewish stuff.
That's great.
All of that was dominated by the Jews. Why? Because they didn't give a fuck about American values. Why? Because they weren't Americans. Why? Because they're a stateless people.
You got to write this essay. I like this.
I did. It's chapter 6 in Renegade History of the United States.
Is that right? You talking about the Jews in there? I read the Italian chapter. I read the black chapter. I got to look.
What the fuck?
Sorry,
Yes.
Sorry, my bad. My bad.
Right. Oh my God. How'd you miss that? Yeah.
Well, do you know why Jews were bankers and had money?
Because they're smart.
Yeah, no, because the Catholic Church had a forbid usury, and Jews who weren't allowed to own property.
There you go.
So were forced to be city dwellers,
right?
And they were allowed to give loans, and they were the only ones.
Yeah,
that's why they had pawn shops, and that's that was just it was because of anti-Semitism that they became bankers, right? And that's why the Jewish banks funded a lot of the American Revolution.
Yeah,
they had accumulations of capital separate from monarchy, because they were allowed. That was the only thing they could do. They weren't allowed to touch the land. So
the renegade greatness of Jews also is derived from them having been slaves. So when you enslave a people, you are not just telling them, you are forcing them into permanent exile. They are always going to be outside the society, right? They are just exploited labor. That's it. Clearly, right? By definition, that's what a slave is. So slaves, therefore, never are allowed, even if they want to, allowed to merge their identity with the nation state or the greater community, the greater society. So they don't give a fuck about laws like usury or the morality behind usury laws, because that's the goyim's morality. We're not even part of that community, right? So this is why, I say African Americans have had the kind of culture they've had, because they were originally slaves here. So they didn't give a fuck, generally speaking, about American morality, American ethics, about American ways of being, about you should wear a business suit properly instead of a zoot suit.
Nice.
You shouldn't dance with bent elbows. Well, they did, right? You should think that work is good no matter what. Well, why in the fuck would a black slave in the United States think that work in itself is good? They're the last person to adopt the Puritan work ethic. Thank God. That's why we have like American fun, is because of those fucking black people and the Jews. And they're stateless. Both are people who are essentially eternally stateless. Despite all the best efforts to make both into good American citizens, which has been fairly successful, there's still within both of those groups an element of statelessness, which creates this renegade culture, which gives us all the freedoms that you guys and I value. When you start merging your identity with this greater good, with the greater community, which I would never want for anybody in RU, you stop being interested in freedom and pleasure, and you're only interested in serving others and this other thing, which is God or a community or a nation. So that ain't my values. Again, if you want to do that, you can. But anyway, that's my explanation for why.
You should write a book. Just write a book about that. That is.
I should. I think I have a good title for it too. And I think I'm gonna have a whole chapter on Jews in it that you should read.
Yeah, I don't know how I skipped that chapter. I think it's funny, the Jew thing. Like you couldn't pay me to watch what's his face's movie, the Holocaust and the Nazi who saves the Jews,
Oh, Schindler's List?
Oh yeah, that one. Yeah, it couldn't pay me to see something like that. Right. It was always still sort of hilarious to me that the guy who finally made the Jew movie I always wanted to see was Tarantino.
Which Jew? Oh,
Bastards, Inglourious Bastards, right? Where Jews are just fucking kicking some goddamn ass.
Yeah, but that shit is made up. What I want is I want a movie. There's never been a movie about the bad Jews of the pre-war era, like the jazz Jews. When the people I'm talking about, the ones who invented pornography, basically in this country, they did.
You get all the Jew gangster stuff.
There've been
we don't associate. It's true that in American cinema, you think about gangsters, you think about Italians.
Yeah.
But you watch Boardwalk Empire or one of the great gangster movie of all time is Miller's Crossing, Coen Brothers.
Is that about
a great mix of the Italians? You have Italian mob, the Irish mob, and the Jewish mob.
Oh, didn't know.
And so you get this hilarious, the language that circulates between them as all three get all mixed up. So they refer to you get the Italians and the Irish referring to the Jew as the Shmata kid.
Mm-hmm.
And Shmata is Yiddish for rags, clothing makers, and
yeah.
I don't know, it's a great mishmash. Yeah, but all the early gangsters, it was the Jews first, right? It's Murder Inc.
Yep, the Purple Gang in Detroit. I mean, it was the same time as the Sicilians, but yeah, they had almost as powerful a mafia in the United States. All right, we've been talking a lot because I'm a quarter Jewish too, so I talk a lot. So I want someone else to talk. I know you guys have thoughts, ideas. You probably have some disagreements, which we want to hear about too. Citizens United, you're wrong, Daniel. You should be supporting Citizens United. But don't you guys agree?
Yeah, tell me why.
Come on, guys. What do you think about our critique of capitalism? That it's not.
I want to talk about Citizens United because it seems to me like if I had my druthers, if you actually wanted any sense of the republic and whatever this thing is, I would say you can't spend any money. No independent money is allowed into an election. No one can contribute. And it just so that way you don't have rich people running, right? And their rich friends running. It just literally makes it democratic. Like you're actually believing democracy. I don't understand how having it bought and paid for explicitly.
Because Citizens United was about the question of whether the government should regulate donations to electoral campaigns.
Right. And I'm saying there should be it should be regulated, and the regulation should be no contributions. Like the terms of running are such that It's absolutely, if you want a legislature that is actually democratic, that actually represents the people as opposed to private capital, you have to remove capital from the equation.
But what kind of regulation would the federal government of the United States, that is, as it is currently constituted, meaning it is dominated entirely by two parties that are almost identical, what kind of regulations would you think they would put on elections and election funding?
No, right. They're not going to. I get this. And what they did with, it seems to me, with Citizens United was just make it explicit. Now they just said, listen, my seat here in Congress and the Senate is bought and paid for by someone else. We do not serve the interests of the public explicitly. We're nothing shy about this, coming right out and saying it. It's this hijacking of this, again, the socialism for corporations, right? And,
but what kind of donations, what kind of contributions to an electoral campaign should not be allowed? That, so I can pay, this is a little anachronistic, but whatever, like I can pay to have 500 flyers printed, supporting Bernie Sanders or whoever, right? And that's going to cost me money, like whatever, a dime each. I spend $100 on it, let's say, and I distribute it to my neighborhood. That's private funding of
it gets complicated. I'm just so fucking happy. It's one reason I believe a big part of me still clings to socialism, because I don't want to have to think about this. I don't really want to live in a democracy. I don't want to participate in debates and vote and read newspapers and have opinions. Fuck that. I just want to take care of. Just pave my roads, pick up my garbage, let me live in my house, make sure I can get some food. And get I don't want to think about that. I don't care if it's a monarchy. I don't care if it's a democracy, a Republican democracy like we have.
Yep.
As long as I don't have to work that much, I'm pretty down with it. I want dad to take care of shit.
Me too.
So I agree with you. I don't know what it would look like, but to make it so explicitly paid for by big capital is just, it's something beautiful about it. So it's not shy anymore, right? We create money for corporations. That's the driving design policy. That it's the mechanisms of our government, at least since Reagan.
So I gave you a couple of arguments on behalf of Citizens United, but the other, just the way things have played out since then sort of proves that it's all bullshit what the left was saying about it, right? What the left was saying at the time was, oh my God, now look what's going to happen. It's the only people we're ever going to have as president. The only possibility to being president or even senator is that you're either a billionaire or you're paid for, or, a corporation is going to support you. Well, what happened? Bernie Sanders became the biggest thing in American politics. And then Donald Trump, self-funded, became the other biggest thing in American politics. And the big corporate sponsored people like the Clintons and the Bushes disappeared.
Yeah, I don't think that's quite accurate. I don't pay much attention, but first of all, Bernie Sanders was touted out there and then systematically eliminated, right? By the Clintons, by the Clinton-Obama neoliberal corporate state, right?
Yeah.
That was pretty explicit.
But he raised more money than they did.
Right, and was still refused. I said, yeah, maybe, but it just seems to me, if you have a legislature that is bought and paid for, you have the financial industry that's been so radically deregulated to the point where they can just literally create money out of thin air, right? It's not even the Fed anymore printing money. It's the commercial banks who are only giving money to big capital. So we're all excluded from that. We just see this in the stimulus package. I'm a small business, right?
Right.
And how come it's so hard for me? I'm just trying to get a $12,000 loan from Wells Fargo as part of this payment protection from the stimulus package. And my guess is I don't get it. While Chris, whatever the fuck their name is, gets 60 million. The system is so explicitly rigged at this point. It's so funny to me. It's just like, it's kind of beautiful. It's just like, yeah, we are just unabashedly, without a sense of shame or regret, have rigged the entire thing to centralize capital and control who can get it. And that's why I finally realized that, of course, all my problems with socialism, especially in California. California gives socialism such a terrible name. You can't, when I was growing up, you could leave school at 16. California, it's 18. And so my son, who does not belong in school, hates it. you get this incredible thing where they don't fund the public schools. So the public schools are literally, the violence he had to deal with there was just so extravagant, you know, to people bring guns to class, to bloody fights every day, police on campus, to sticking him in a private school. I got to pay for it just to keep him alive because he legally has to be in school. You can't work in the state of California under 18 during school hours. You can't be independent, right? I mean, it's unbelievable to me. Same with seatbelts. And I mean, I know that's a national thing, seatbelts and bike helmets and all this nonsense. I don't understand how you can regulate that and then not pay my medical bills. If you pay my medical bills, okay, you can say you got to wear a helmet. But if you're not paying my medical bills, I got to pay my own insurance.
Right.
So socialism, of course, so I keep dreaming of some kind of socialism in which that's not paternal, right? Where I don't have to think about the roads. I don't got to think about my garbage. I don't got to pipe up about every goddamn thing. Like California, all these propositions, you got to, you can vote them. That's why I don't vote. I don't want to think about this stuff. It's why we have representatives. So I still have this dream. I just want some basic shit taken care of. But I'm also well aware that in reality, the last people you want running shit is the government. Because their instinct and their only mode of policy is to make general rules, right? And then enforce them, right? And so the only way to move towards these notions of community that I kind of want, I think, is with crypto, is decentralizing governance, decentralized, and governance and capital at some point becoming the same thing.
Yeah. So yeah, democracy. I have no interest in democracy.
Yeah.
In fact, yeah, I don't want to be involved in democracy. I've never really been involved in democracy. I don't want to start now. Renegade University, if in case anyone's confused at all, this is not a fucking democracy in any way. This is a benevolent dictatorship. Okay. So now you have to take my word for it that it's benevolent. And if you don't, you get to leave. And you can go find another benevolent dictatorship, or you can go to a democracy and have a great time planning the roads and the bridges and shit.
I got to tell you, one day, Dr. Russell, I'm going to try to persuade you, and we've talked about it a little bit, and I think it's still too new, is to tokenize the university.
Oh, yeah.
And then decentralize governance, right? So that it's not all going through you or anybody, right? That it's that's owned and run.
Well, yeah, okay. I mean, until then, it'll be a benevolent dictatorship by me, though. But yeah,
this is the greatest luxury, and we love you for it, so we don't got to do anything.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Right.
All, yeah.
I do all the goddamn work. Yeah.
You do all the goddamn work.
Right. And it's exhausting, let me tell you. But no, I mean, so that's the world I'm talking about here is what I want is a decentralized world of benevolent dictatorships.
Love that. Yeah, totally. That's ideal to me. The benevolent dictatorship has to be, I had this again, another realization in college, has to be the best form of government. I mean,
yeah. But this is crucial though. This is crucial. This is the thing. This is the position we must always have, I believe. We must always be against borders. We must be open borders globally all the time, no matter what, right? Because the last thing we want is to be trapped inside of a dictatorship that turns out to be not so benevolent.
Again, I think if we go back to crypto, I think we all see this happening, right? The nation state. The thing I'm finally beginning to understand is that our banking system, this fiat system, the nation state, really served the industrial economy, because in an industrial economy, you have to build a factory, right? And that takes an enormous amount of capital up front, right? So you need that kind of centralization of capital. And so our whole economy serving the nation state, having this monopoly on money, made some practical sense, right? But in an information age, it doesn't make any sense. And the nation state is just an anachronism, just as a centralized banking system is an anachronism. It's an industrial age economic tool, economic system for an information age. So just as information has become decentralized, right? And this has been the biggest explosion in our lifetime. It's so obvious, right? The fall of all the networks, the fall of newspapers, right? The fall of medicine, the fall of everything, right? Has just been radically decentralized, right? But weirdly, a lot of our systems architecture, imagine someone out there is a coder, will know more about this than I do, but like we still have server farms, we still stack everything, still have these centralized architectures. And then we have a finance system, which is still centralized. It doesn't serve the information age at all. It's just the wrong tool. And so I think what you'll get are these communities, and nation state borders won't mean anything, right? You'll have communities. And so, there are networks now, or the rails of the system are being built so that systems are interoperable, right? And so that you don't, I'm in Ethereum, you're in Bitcoin, you're in Civic, or whatever, you're in Tron, everyone's isolated. It's like, no, there'll be a system. Then there'll be these rails of movement between them. So they'll be both open and closed, right? And a network could close itself off and choose not to be interoperable. That'd be its choice. But the nation state, you'll see, I think, will begin to disappear. And then we'll have, more, it will be replaced by things I can't imagine because I haven't thought about it enough and I'm not learned enough in this manner.
Do you know why World War II happened?
No.
World War II happened because Japan and Germany, and to a lesser extent Italy, chose to close themselves off to the rest of the world, in particular to world trade. So in the 1930s, this is happening in those countries, right? They start to develop a system that was then known as autarky. And as soon as they started doing that, as soon as especially Germany started doing this, closing its borders off to trade, all of the foreign policy journals in the United States started talking about autarky, the problem of autarky, and these nation states that are closing themselves off to world trade. This, of course, is at the very moment when the United States is gaining ascendancy as the dominant superpower and just about to take over from Great Britain as the world superpower. So they knew, with their massive industrial engine here, that in trade, free trade, they would win every negotiation, basically, right? So the freer the trade, the better the United States was going to do, was the thinking. Pretty logical. So they couldn't allow a country, especially one in the middle of fucking Europe, with the industrial core of Europe right there, to close off that whole section of the world economy to trade, because the United States would have no way to influence, leverage, or control that space, that crucial space. And Japan started moving again. Also, they needed imports from the United States, but they started to close themselves off, and they started to get their own resources from China so that they could be powerful without depending on trade with the United States and the West. They had to go. And this is what was said in the foreign policy journals all the way through the 1930s. This is one thing that historians have totally missed as to the motivations behind Britain and especially the United States in going to war. They wanted to open the borders to trade. So I'm just saying this kind of complicates things a little bit for our grand utopian vision here, right? If we have an Ethereum community over here, or an Anatha community over here, or a Renegade University community over there that chooses to close itself off to everyone else, what do? Do we invade with the 82nd Airborne? Do we have D-Day again? Or do we just tell them that they're bad people, for doing this? Or
At some point it'd be out.
Do we ask them nicely? Do we offer them? Do we bribe them? What do we do?
Competitive. The crypto anarchy at some point, I'm very new to this. And so I'm definitely a noob, I've never used that before, but that's the jargon, right? It's competitive, right? So it will live or die by its success, right? And so if you don't have a state-sponsored corporate state, right? If you don't have, the credible thing about our system that's developed is you have a monopoly on money and an armed forces that work at the behest, not just of capitalism. That's not true, right? I've had my own company for 22 years and the state hates me. They do everything they can to fuck me up and have me not succeed, right? Everything is about large capital. Everything is about centralization of capital. That's who gets the loans. That's who gets bailed out, right? And really, they really fuck with small business. Look what's happening right now. The only theory that makes any sense when I see people talking about the launch of this virus being purposeful, right? And we've all seen these videos and shit. And it's like I'm like, well, why? What's in it for somebody? And well, it's fear, and fear allows for control. And I'm like, okay, there's some hidden fascist state that's going to keep us in our houses, maybe. To me, the only thing if I was going to consider it a conspiracy, which I do not, it's when everything reopens up, who's going to be left other than, McDonald's, Red Lobster, whatever, chains. All these mom and pop shops, restaurants are dead. They're just dead. There's no way they're coming back. They're not given loans. They just haven't been bailed out. They've been systematically eliminated. And in the last 10 years or something, we've seen this rise of the mom and pop. I mean, it's complicated, right? But cities like Portland are just overrun with true mom and pop. San Francisco, you already see that the price has gotten so high that, Valencia Street in San Francisco, the Mission, all the restaurants used to be mom and pop shops, but now every single one of them, to a T, every single one of them is owned by a group. It's a corporate group, and they own this one and that one and that one in these cities. There's not one mom and pop shop, but that's the only thing that begins to make sense. You have this whole state apparatus, laws, an armed state, eliminate that, and then you actually truly get some competition. Right. And so the crypto anarchist thing is really just a radical capitalism, as I think one might imagine it. It's just, well, you guys want to close up? Okay, who's going to join your thing? If the terms are egregious, I'm just going to pop over here. And one of the great things about crypto, and I think this will become an intense battle, especially over the next 10 years, is you can't shut down a network. That's the whole point. It's decentralized. So when Backpage, everyone knows, Backpage was, a great resource for sex workers, for other things, but it was really a great resource. And there were other ones in the Bay Area that were fantastic, Redbook, which were these elaborate communities around sex workers. It was so easy to shut down. You just take the servers, the whole thing's gone, right? But with a decentralized network, there's no servers to seize. There's no one to arrest. You might go after this guy, but the network keeps going. There's no way you can stop it. Literally, it's impossible. You can try very hard. It becomes like whack-a-mole, and I think that's what will happen. It kind of is happening with the SEC. If anyone's following any of this, they're really coming down pretty hard on crypto, trying to define everything as a security, as opposed to like a utility token, as opposed to another kind of asset.
Yep.
And that's been their main way, so they can find individuals who have profited. But if there's no individuals and it's truly distributed and there's no server farm, I can't wait for, there to be, and of course the dark web is one of the great users, right? One of the, I guess the big underground site in Russia shipped it, lost their own currency last year, which is so fucking fantastic, but we can launch a Backpage, just decentralized. There's no way. What do you do? There's no way to shut it down. There's no one to arrest. So I think the armed state becomes the centralized armed state becomes a little bit this odd thing, right? This an anachronism, because what can they enforce at some point, right?
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, they could round up a bunch of you and put you in jail as examples.
Totally, and they will, and they kind of are, right?
Yeah.
No question about it. But the network keeps running. You don't stop the currency. You don't stop the network from running, even if you arrest those people.
Right. Are we witnessing the beginning of the end of the nation state?
Yeah, don't you think? I mean,
damn. I mean, I think so. I hope so.
Yeah.
It looks, but damn, let's just pause on that for a second here. With cryptocurrency, and by the way, just cheap airline flights, just deregulation. I mean, that's a big deal. That's a big deal. Like, working class, poor people can take flights across country lines now. So here's the thing I'm going to say about all this. You're talking about bailouts. You're talking about why mom and pops aren't getting bailed out, but the big corporations are. Why you're not getting bailed out, but fucking the banks are. Who gets bailed out the most? When you think about bailouts in the United States recently, who's gotten bailed out? Banks and General Motors. Now, call me a conspiracy theorist, but I believe, I've been saying this for a while, that in a superpower, inside the dominant superpower, every major political question ends up being a foreign policy question. I don't think it's an accident. I don't think it's an accident that they needed to keep afloat the big banks and GM. Why? Because big banks and GM quite literally drove the war machine in every war of the 20th century. and the 21st. So GM was nationalized essentially in World War I and World War II, and produced all this stuff, all the tanks and the planes and the bombs and et cetera, right? And the banks financed the whole thing. So, I mean, I think that's got to be a part of it. And whereas you, Daniel Coffeen, with your little fuck ass little business, and the mom and pop fucking little store run by the Mexicans what do they contribute to the potential war effort? And then cryptocurrency, for God's sake, I mean, that's just like sucking the lifeblood out of the nation state. We can't allow that.
Yeah, no question. If everyone's curious, just look up recent SEC rulings on Telegram and Kick and a bunch of the bigger, Kick launched their own currency. I don't use Kick, but I know the kids do. It's pretty popular.
I don't know what's Kick.
Messaging. It's a messaging that's not tethered to your to your phone. I mean, to your phone number, right? I think the Snapchat does that, and there's a bunch of these. So Kick was one. I know it was popular. I hear it was popular among sex workers. I wouldn't know personally, but they launched a currency, and the SEC ruled against them. Argued it was a security. Security meaning, does anyone give a shit about this? I can shut up about this. I had to look all this stuff up, the Howey test and all this, right? Security is when you put your money in, and then through the labor of somebody else, the value of that goes up or down, right? And so, what we're launching a true utility token, right? It within our system, it has a very particular function on day one. There's no gap, but it's all about trying to manage the SEC's war on crypto. And that whole that's driven by the explosion of crypto a couple of years ago in the popular space, was because it was the restrictions, the regulations on investment disappeared, right? So so when I was in high school, and my teacher had me read Gabriel Coco, we talked about right? And the creation of the USDA as not there for the public good, but to save the meat industry. Right. And that was the first revelation, right? I was 15, and I was like, oh. When I realized it was the art of interpretation, that's what really turned me on, right? The things you think are one thing or another thing. Fuck, I forgot my whole train here. It's what happens when I talk for too long.
Securities.
Fuck, I don't know. I just totally lost my train of thought.
Securities.
Securities.
Getting shut down.
So the problem is, again, and that the SEC just trying desperately to wrap their hands around this thing. I don't even know who the SEC is. We don't vote for them. It's unclear to me exactly who the SEC is and how they get these rights to do this kind of thing. And it is about the fear of money being taken away from the state, of course.
Yeah.
But I think it's not just that, because the state can print money as it wants, as we've learned, right? Have you read much of this MMT's modern monetary theory?
I know the basics. Stephanie Kelton is behind it.
I don't know. I started poking around in it, right? And their argument is use taxation to control inflation rather than to fund.
It's just Keynesianism, isn't it? Isn't it the same thing? It's just like printing money and spending it on social programs, and then when people get that money, as they're supposed to do right now, they'll pump it back into the economy and revive the economy.
Yeah, and you control inflation. Because once you're untethered from the gold standard, you can print money as you want, right? And so,
how do they control for inflation?
That would be taxation. So taxation wouldn't fund anything. They would tax, and then you take your money down to the government. They burn it. They just take it off the market.
Oh,
so it would be like as needed to control inflation.
I don't know.
Kind of interesting, but at some point, I think it's big. I think it's less concern about revenue streams for the state than it is about just general loss of control.
Right.
Independent governance systems with their own currencies. Then
that will not be allowed.
Yeah, they wouldn't even allow. My kid and I tried watching this TV show on Netflix now on Waco.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we turned it off. It wasn't very engaging, but I was trying to explain to my kid. I was just like, and it's something I've always wondered about the police, right? Like, why don't you just walk away? What was the need to even go in their place in the first place? Like what? But the government can't stand this idea of a community that's independent and armed. They just can't stand it, even though they're not doing anything. They haven't really done anything. They're just hanging out, having sex, being their weird selves. Power to them. What's the problem? They're not.
Well, I mean, the pretext was that they were abusing children. That was
Oh,
the
they'll always make a pretext. Yeah, yeah, but they went in, I thought, on an ATF anyway.
Yeah. Well, right. True. The ATF was there. That's right.
Yeah, this government just can't stand the idea of some independent entity.
Yeah.
Outside its purview.
Okay. So to sum up, so we don't like the nation state, but we do like community, but we don't like democracy. We like cryptocurrency. We like open borders. We don't like morality or moralism, but we do like values, and we're not fans of virtue. Is that everything? What else? Oh, and sometimes we do want a father figure, but we don't want to impose that on other people. Am I good?
I think that about does it. I love the last bit is very important, right?
The father figure part?
Yeah, but the nuance you throw in there is all I ever want really from public discourse is, no, I never want a father. It's like, well, sometimes I do.
Oh yeah.
It's complicated. Like I don't have to have a uniform platform, It's like,
right.
Maybe I want it here, but not here. It's okay. It doesn't have to be so consistent.
Right.
It can be nuanced and idiosyncratic and worked out on the fly based on circumstance.
Right. And that little combination of things right there, we just solved the most enduring question in political philosophy. What is the proper relationship between the individual and the community? Done.
Nice. What's next?
You all get a degree, you all graduate. Congratulations. Go out into the world and make change.
What's next? Now we got to learn how to give blowjobs.
Well, you speak for yourself. No, I don't. Jed raised his hand.
I can help with that.
Do you want to teach the class, by the way?
Oh, sure. I'd be happy to.
I'm looking for instructors. Carol Queen said that there was a woman who taught the blowjob class. Her center was called the Center for Sex and Society. It was in San Francisco in the Mission. And they had a class on blowjobs for like years. She said it was the #1 bestseller. Like they standing room only every time. It's taught by a woman, but I don't see I think it should be taught by a man. Because we know penis is better than anyone.
Yeah, I know what it feels like, and I know what you all want. So
right,
perfect.
The practitioner should be also a consumer or whatever. Yeah. So
yeah.
Well, we'll talk. Guys, come on. Questions? Anything for us or comments? Do you all agree with everything we said? I don't believe that. You must have some.
Well, I want to go in a different direction.
Do it.
Daniel Coffeen, I've been thinking he's overlapping with some things that I'm thinking about. Now he's saying, to recap what he said before we were recording, that one of the situations we have is we have these competing narratives. We have different people bring forth different evidence, and we may privilege some evidence over another. And it seems to me that what he was saying is, well, how do we make that decision? And his value is that what's the most vital, what contributes the most to your own vitality. But it seems to me that we're not really just talking about a difference between competing narratives. We're talking about different ways of knowing. And that's something I just kind of want to ask you about or provoke you to think about. And I want to mention just this one thing, because it's come up when you talked about affect, but something that I think about is we have this word called vibe. Some people have good vibes or bad vibes. And the Beach Boys famously, from my generation, had a song called Good Vibrations, or, the music scene in Seattle's dead, the vibe's in Portland. But it's not a real thing because we only have 5 senses. I think Aristotle said that.
That's not true. You know that.
I know it's not true. It's not true. But what I'm saying is that the vibe has this semi-official, it doesn't have an official status. We all know it's real, but we all act like if we go too far with it, that's woo-woo. And I like your term affect because I think vibe is actually probably like a subset of affect.
Yeah.
So really, I think what we're getting at here is that we have these other ways of knowing. And I think this gets back to what Thaddeus is saying about, this is like, we have ways of knowing in our head, we have ways of knowing in our body too. And so I just was hoping you could address that.
I think that's the whole thing. In a way, what you're talking about is what most of my writing has always been about, right? And it's about other modes of knowing, right? My book is about what I call a new technology of making sense in different ways, and the architectures of sense making, including the evidence, right? So I think it was on our talk that where we talked about affect in science, right? And it's all over my blog. I've been talking for years that it is exactly what you're saying, right? It's a different mode of knowing that involves a different conception of the body, a different relationship of the relationship between the body and the world, the body and other people. So it's an onto-epistemology, right? Because the minute we say, well, there's 5 senses, I'm not going to include the other one. Well, then I've just that model of the body has eliminated a whole mode of knowing. And I agree. I mean, the vibes thing is so great because we all know it, and it's a common term, right? Like mood, vibes. You walk in a room, this doesn't feel like there's a shitty vibe. Well, how do you feel that? What senses are you using? How, right? And what happens when we begin to assume that there are these vibes, you know? How do we?
I'm just going to jump in because
Yeah.
I've been through I've done some spiritual work, not going into the details now. Nobody's telling me it ain't real, man, because I'm telling you, I deal with it on a daily, weekly. I've gone through something called Kundalini.
Nice.
It's really freaking real to me. So all these people walking around talking about it's like a theoretical discussion. And I'll tell you too, your thing about affect. I went to New York City and people have talked about how that city has changed. The affect has changed.
Oh,
I was like somebody, I mean, I've been there. I haven't been there for 25 years and I went back and it was like somebody unscrewed the cap on the bottle and the fizz was gone from that city and it ain't coming back. And that's real.
Yep. Let me see if I can find this thing. It's funny because I think, I did this whole thing on affect, and one of the biggest reactions I got is I have a podcast here. Here, I'll share this here. It's pretty long, and I don't know if you're tired of watching me talk here. But I kept referring, I said, affect is objective. And a lot of my friends kept coming back to me like, what do you mean it's objective? And I realized that I keep meaning to do a follow-up on that. But what I mean by objective, meaning it's there, it's not here. That the scientific dominant paradigm says affect is subjective. That's just in you. That's your reaction.
Exactly.
And that's not true. It's there. It's in the world. It's of objects. It doesn't mean it's fixed. It doesn't mean it's only one thing. Affect is multiple, and we all have different relationships to it, just as we have different relationships to a song or to sound, other things we know we can measure and feel with our senses. But it is of the world. It is there. It is not in me. That's one of the biggest dupes, I think, that the sort of scientific liberal state has sort of propagated on us. They've removed it as a term of epistemology. And so it's been suppressed, and I think it makes a lot of us anxious. I think it creates a state of anxiety in the world because we all know it's there, we're all experiencing it, but we're not allowed to actually talk about it. We don't have a vocabulary.
We're not allowed to use it.
Yeah.
Right.
We're not allowed to use it in any real way.
Yeah.
We get poo-pooed. We have to qualify what we say and go, well, I'm not being woo-woo. It's like, fuck, no. I'm talking about this real thing happening all the time that's ubiquitous and defines the very layer of being itself, and therefore our epistemology, and therefore our ethics, and therefore, right, the ripple effect of moving affect to the forefront and reckoning it for real.
You know what this is reminding me of? It's reminding me of, and I don't want to open up a whole new field of discourse here, but because we're about to say goodnight, but it reminds me of every argument, every fight I've ever had with a girlfriend, right? Because the traditional male way of dealing with conflict and argument is to be rational and logical. And every time I've got every single fight with every girlfriend I've ever had and wife, it's been, well, I just feel this way about this thing. And I know you're very logical and rational about this, and it makes sense what you're saying, but it just feels different to me than what you're saying.
Yeah.
To which I'm like, well, what the fuck? How am I supposed to how am I supposed to get across what's going on here? And
But look at all you're feeling there, right? I mean, that's anyone who's so, I think this is a pretty common thing. If you've ever taken a class that's been called rhetoric, the thing you learn, it comes out of Aristotle, is that every argument, has ethos, pathos, and logos, right? So ethos is the sort of stature of, or the position in a way of the person from which the information is coming, or the argument, the language, and call it authority, but it's not just the authority per se, right? It's just the shtick of that person. You have logos, which is the logical sort of syllogistic aspect of something, the practical reasons.
Right.
You have pathos, right? And so Aristotle says, well, you shouldn't, if you're in court, you shouldn't play on the pathos of a judge, right? You should really, he just privileges logos. But pathos never goes away, right? And so even our classical, gods like Aristotle, who's more or less unreadable, but still very popular for some reason, pathos and emotion is considered constitutive. Even if it needs to be subverted, it's still constitutive of the argument. And it seems to me, and the ethos, pathos, logos sort of trilogy really works really well. And I use it in my work with clients and how I define brands for clients, right? Because it's how any argument's built, and any given argument can privilege one or the other to various degrees, right? You can privilege the logical reasons. My vacuum cleaner is cheaper, and it works better, just super logical. And I'm Dyson, and I'm an inventor, and you really trust me, right? And they sort of dial up that rather than the pathos, right? And then you get brands that just dial up the pathos. Nike is a great one, right? Nike, it just, the emotion, just do it, right? I don't even know what it is, I want to do it. And then of course they have their research and all that shit to make good products or not, but, right? So it is constitutive of arguments, but for some reason gets subverted in more general epistemologies.
I'm just bummed out that I've now realized that I was less correct in all those arguments I had with all those women.
Yeah, right.
That they had some objective basis, in what they were saying, even though they were just talking about their feelings. God damn it!
But even the things
you're overemphasizing your head, not your body, which is what was the point of Renegade University?
I know. I never said I wasn't a hypocrite. I'm a total hypocrite.
One of the funny things about logic, what you're saying sort of we're talking about with women, that sort of brings up a kind of classic sort of cliche, right, about these relationships. But of course, every so-called logical argument is itself always pathetic as well.
Sure.
Right? And why you chose this evidence. And it's wielded can be wielded with a lot of violence.
Yes, indeed.
And so it itself is, it's while there's ethos, pathos, logos, they're never separate. Right. So that's just a construct. But the fact every argument is always all three intertwined to various degrees of intensity.
Yep. Nope. I'm with you all the way. It also reminds me of my father I was on the other side of this too, because my father was a computer engineer, scientistic, right? Science was his religion. If you couldn't quantify it, measure it, it didn't make any sense and didn't belong in a conversation. So I was like, Dad, I'm lonely and depressed. I mean, I didn't even have this conversation because it wasn't going to go anywhere. But like, I wanted to say to him, Dad, I'm lonely and depressed. He'd be like, well, what are the numbers on that? Like, what does that equal? Like, so I just couldn't talk to him. So that's the problem. All right, it's 4:00. We are done for today.
Right.
Daniel, thank you for a long, incredible, amazing, enlightening, fascinating discussion in which we basically solved the biggest questions that have bedeviled humanity for millennia.
Yeah, I'm glad we could do it. It was super fun. Thanks everybody for tolerating and participating. Thank you, Thaddeus.
Thank you.
Good. I look forward to more.
Yeah, in person, hopefully.
Yes.
When they let us out of our homes. Guys, I'll be here, same place at 10 o'clock tomorrow, and we'll be doing we'll talk some American history, talk about whatever you want, but I have an agenda. We'll talk about foreign policy and popular culture and freedom abroad and sex and all the violence and all the good stuff and whatever you guys want to talk about. But we're here starting at 10 o'clock. See you there. See you then.
Awesome.
See you here. See you then. And thanks again, Daniel.
Thank you, guys.
All right.
Thanks,
Bye, everyone. Have a good night.